Fantastic. Okay, there. Hey, I'm sorry to bug you. So I'm trying to start it, but it won't let me start it because it's not 7 p.m. Right? Is that why? I don't know. I'm clicking on it and it's not letting me start it. Nothing. It's just the start just isn't dark. It's dark. It won't let me click it. Do you see me in there? There, oh, there you are. Hi. All right. We're both Becky Anderson. I put my email up there because I'm going to ask them to send us feedback, by the way. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks. Oh, and 3 people have entered the waiting room. So, oh, maybe it's fine then. Maybe it wouldn't let me hit start because I was already in there. I just put in the meeting ID. But then I went over to it on my, I logged into Zoom and then I said, join a meeting and put in the ID. Oh, okay. So it's fine then. It looks like I can see the waiting room. You've signed out because you are currently signed in on another device. All right, never mind then. Okay, toodaloo. Now I'm back in. Yes, and by the way, it looks normal to you, right? It's not backwards, my email address? Okay. Okay, I'm gonna go to the waiting room then. I think I'm fine. Okay. Oh, okay, I'll do that. All right, bye. Hello. Let's see. Trying to rename myself. How do I do that? There we go. All right, can you guys hear me at all? Oh, I have to. Sorry, we're still learning this. There you are. Okay.
Here we go.
Hi. Sorry, we're still getting the ropes with it all. You'd think by now, this far into it, we'd be better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Looks like Cheryl's having a little time. Okay. Well, hi, I'm Carrie.
Hi.
It's nice to meet you.
Yes, likewise.
Thanks for being here for us tonight.
Sure.
Let's see. And you're going to be in conversation with Megan, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Got a few people waiting to get in. We are just starting our virtual events program, so we're still kind of getting the hang of all the nitty gritty. I'm sure you've done like a million of these, but for us, it's pretty new. So hang with us as we try to figure it out.
Okay. Okay, no problem.
And I don't see Megan on here yet.
Right.
Okay. Huh. It's a whole new world.
Yeah.
And as far as logistics for tonight, so do you want me to collect questions and send them over to you through the...
Oh, it doesn't matter. Maybe Megan will have a preference when she gets here.
Okay. Great. Let's see, I'm still calling up certain stuff. Sorry.
Sure, take your time.
All right. Well, I'm about halfway through the book, by the way, and I love it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I'm a big zombie fan. Yes.
That's not bad for a long book.
No, I know. At first, I was a little intimidated. I'm just like, wow, this is a really big book, but it goes really fast. I mean,
yeah,
it's phenomenal. I love it. So
thanks so much.
I love how modern it is, like the modern take on it and the, you know.
Yeah. It's, that's what he wanted to do.
I love it.
To be completely modern. But he always did. He actually never made straight sequels. He was always modernizing it.
Okay. Yeah, I just love all the references to technology in it, and you know, since a lot of like older horror type stuff, like they don't have to deal with technology and communications being what they are nowadays, and how that would change, you know, the strength of an outbreak or whatever. So that was really interesting.
Yeah, it's its own challenge to have to deal with technology.
Yeah. So that's been very cool.
Yeah.
We'll see. All right, I'm just making sure. You're about our 4th virtual event, maybe 5th.
Okay.
Which is why we're still kind of getting our way, like figuring it out. So we've pretty much settled on the fact that we're going to use Zoom through Event Combo. Crowdcast didn't work for us. Like we've tried a couple different ideas to try to make it work for our customers, but also work for you and for us. And, you know, so that's why I'm a little out of my element here tonight, trying to figure it out. Although you'd think from all these school board meetings by now for my kids' school.
You froze for a minute there, but you're back.
Oh, I'm back. Okay. I think I'm pretty, it says my internet connection's unstable. Let me move.
Okay.
My home office is in my closet, so.
Yeah, so many are.
I have children, and that's where they leave me alone, so let me move around here. I was afraid that was going to happen. I'm pretty sure the way that this account works is that it's from the cloud or whatever. So if I lose connectivity, I think you guys still keep going, and then I'll just bot back in if I were to lose.
I think that's accurate.
Yeah. So I was doing one before we paid for the upgraded account where we lost connectivity, and I disappeared and so did the event.
All right.
So that was fun. All right. There we go. Stable internet, better. Oh, there's Megan. Okay. And then I have to give Megan access.
Hello.
Hi, Megan. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, how are you? Good.
Hey, hi, how are you?
Good. Oh, fun. I'm glad. I'm always surprised it works.
I know, I was just saying that this is kind of new for us. This is probably only our 4th or 5th virtual event, so we're still getting our bearings with it, and I'm embarrassing about it at times, so.
Well, I think the awkwardness is part of the charm of these events.
Maybe I should start marketing it that way. Because it definitely is a little awkward.
Yeah, I would show up to something if it were marketed as super awkward. I'd kind of want to see that.
I'm not above trying anything at this point, so let me tell you, to make something work in this bizarre time we are in.
Yes. Well, timely book.
It really is, actually. I mean, it's really funny how timely it is. I think it's just kind of part of the overall craziness of this moment, really.
This was part of your master plan all along, Daniel.
Maybe you're behind the COVID. Okay, well, I think we're expecting about 20, and we're not quite there yet, so why don't we give it just a couple more minutes? I will be right back.
Yeah.
And then we'll get going. I'll do a quick intro, and then I'm going to let you guys roll with it, okay?
So
Yeah.
many questions.
Oh,
Oh,
my
good. You have
God.
so many questions. Oh, that actually, I have a question for you, Megan. Do you want me just to collect like audience questions through the format here on Zoom? Do you guys want to just look through them and pick the ones you want? Do you want me to send you certain ones? Do you want me to read them at the end?
I don't think it's going to be an issue catching them.
Okay. I'll let you guys pick them then.
Yeah, sometimes if if they submit them, you can see them, but if they put them in the chat, I'll miss them. So if there's anything, I guess, that you see that feels.
That gets missed. Okay. Then
Yeah,
I'll jump
it feels like a good question. That's great. I am sure there's going to be lots of them, but of course I have a long list. So I do.
Great. All right. I'll be right back.
Okay, take your time.
How many of these have you done so far?
That's a good question. Maybe 4 or 5.
Right. So it's been intense for you, I'm sure.
Yeah, and it looks like there's not very many people in this one, so we can kind of just do what we want, maybe.
Yeah, well, I don't know. The thing I kind of like about them is you're kind of eavesdropping on a conversation.
Yeah. I'm doing this crazy thing tomorrow. I really regret it. I'm doing an event in Second Life. Do you remember Second Life?
Oh my God, yes.
It still exists. And they actually have like good authors. I didn't have any idea. So I'm doing this. So I agreed to go into a Second Life and do this reading in this like virtual room, and it's so weird, and it really is pretty complicated. Like you have to walk up on this stage, and he says like most people fall off the stage.
Oh my gosh.
And when this guy who runs it sends emails, it's like I have no idea what he's talking about. Like he's like, I mean, and he's using like, I don't know if he's some sort of like using like hacker speak, but I don't have a clue what he's saying.
Right. No, of course not. It's like a different language entirely. Like all deep fan culture. It's like if you go in the layers, it's so dense and specific, especially now, I think, because I think gamers are gaming more than ever. Right?
Yeah. So I don't know. That's like at noon tomorrow. So I'll let you know if that's something that you need. If you need to get on that, I'll let you know.
Oh my gosh.
A couple more here. There we go.
Have you mainly been able to focus on novel writing these days?
Well, I just got signed some TV deals, so I'm pivoting. I finished my novel that comes out next year, so now I sold that book to TV.
Yeah, I saw that, and I'm fascinated by that company. I don't know it, so I looked into it, and I was like, oh, this is a
they're
pretty
huge.
neat.
They're enormous, and now they're bigger because, of course, they got bought by a bigger corporation, which is Hasbro. So.
Oh, right, Hasbro.
Yeah.
Like, who would have guessed Hasbro out of all the like companies that would rise and fall?
Yes. Yeah.
Hasbro would keep rising.
We'll always need toys.
Yeah. Well, maybe you'll have a toy line this time, right?
I could be. You never know.
I'm doing so much stuff that's like scripts and comics and graphic novels that I'm like just dying to go back to a novel. Just to write something thick and like impenetrable
in your own ideas for a while. I had the opposite. I was so glad to get out of that tunnel.
Oh, yeah.
Have conversations again.
Yeah, right.
All right, I am going to jump in if you guys don't mind real quick.
Yeah.
Let's see, we're sitting at about 7:03. I'm going to do a small intro here, and then maybe there might be one or two more that join us. So I just wanted to say I'm Carrie. I work for Anderson's events team, and I just want to say welcome to everybody for coming. Thank you so much for being here. We at Anderson's are well known. We've been, of course, selling books independently since 1875, and we've got quite a reputation for our events program, which usually averages about 400 events a year, believe it or not. And we are having to reinvent the wheel here by switching to a virtual program, which is terrifying and exciting. So I know it's kind of weird, but I did put my email address right up here. And that is because I'm wondering if those of you who are attending tonight might be willing to give me a little bit of feedback, to give our whole team feedback about how the event process went for you. Like I said, we're kind of building this from the ground up, and we're hoping that we're going to be able to continue virtual events we're probably at least through next spring. So we really wanted to be able to still bring you high quality event programming like tonight in this virtual format, but we have no idea what we're doing because we're kind of a bookish people. So if you wouldn't mind letting us know, everything, like how it went from ticketing all the way through tonight's program, we would just really, really love that feedback to help us grow and improve our program. So that is why that's up there. But we'll go ahead and jump on into why you guys are actually here tonight. And again, thank you so much for being here. We're so excited to celebrate this amazing book, which doesn't show up with my background. Okay, back for me to learn. Sorry. So, of course, we're here tonight with New York Times bestselling author Daniel Kraus, who has gone and completed this amazing masterpiece of zombie horror novel that George A. Romero left unfinished during his untimely passing. So we are so excited to have Daniel here. If you have not had a chance to read the book, I'm trying to figure out how I can, there we go. If you haven't had a chance to get your hands on a copy yet, of course, we can get you signed book-plated copies if you purchase through us tonight. And it is a phenomenal book. I'm really enjoying it. I've been a lifelong horror fan, and I am just loving every word of it. So Daniel will be in conversation tonight with fellow author Megan Abbott, and we're so glad to have here. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and let you guys take it away. For those of you at home, if you have questions, go ahead and put it through the chat, and we will forward those along. And then maybe after, when Daniel and Megan are done speaking, then we can go ahead and attack some of those questions from you guys. All right. Thanks so much. And I'm going to let you guys go.
Thank you.
Yay. Hey, it's good to see you.
It's good to see you. It's great to see you.
Yes.
Can you wrap us on right now?
Mike so sways, born up in the
Somebody
80s,
have
flow
their
dirty
sound.
enough to
Someone with the
attract the fly
iPad has
lady.
their sound on.
I go to Columbia now. I'm in my first semester. I'm studying writing. That's a big sort of midlife change. Maybe, sort of, not really. You're younger.
Okay, I guess we're all right. I don't know what that
I
was.
say I am unable to mute or unmute them for some reason, and I can usually mute other people. So sorry about that, guys.
Yeah, I don't know what that was. Anyway, I'm so happy to be talking about this book and this project, which I know has been so consuming for you, and it's so exciting to see it there out in the world. But I thought we would start because I watched it again, the first one last night, which I see many times, but wanted to ramp up for it. And I wondered if we could just start by talking about your first time you saw. I assume you saw the first one first, Night of the Living Dead first.
Yeah, I did.
And a little bit about that experience, just to kick us off.
Well, I mean, it's a tough. First of all, I'm pleased to be that you're called a fellow author because, as you know, I've long fantasized that we would collaborate on something, which is never going to happen, but still is fun to think about. And I do have a vague memory of talking to you about this book. It just seemingly, it feels like years and years ago at some bar in New York. I guess it couldn't have been more than 3 years ago. That seems impossible. Had to have been a decade ago. But anyway, it's hard to talk about the first time I viewed it because I was so young. You know, I was maybe 5 or 6 years old. So
Really?
yeah. I mean, my mom was a big fan of. I grew up on black and white horror stuff, really, because she liked Night of the Living Dead and Twilight Zone. So that was like my constant diet. And Night of the Living Dead was on TV almost as much as the Twilight Zone because of the copyright issues. It was public domain, so anyone could watch it. So it was just on constantly. It was a staple. So I only have kind of vague impressions from those years. Mostly they're of my mom, really, almost more than the movie. Like her just kind of being there and having fun. And I remember her kind of talking to the characters, like telling Barbara, like excoriating Vargo when she fell down and had trouble getting up, and yelling at the guy in the basement. So I mean, I remember really sort of the feeling around it. Yeah. It was never a movie when I was a kid that was particularly scary to me, but that's good. I mean, if it was scary to me at 5 years old, that would have been it. I would have stopped watching it. So it was a comfort thing. Twilight Zone was a slightly different story. Those were scarier to me for some reason. Maybe because they were more comprehensible to a kid because they're short and they're sort of finite in a way that with Night of the Living Dead, I'd be coming in midway, probably go to sleep before it was over. But I do remember seeing it as a kid in colorized versions, seeing it. I remember at some point, like the end of it sinking in, you know, like how horrible the end is. I think there's something that happens when you're a kid when movies come on TV where you happen upon them and you just sort of see parts of it. Like I must have seen like the middle part of Poltergeist 20 times as a kid without ever really seeing the whole thing. But at some point I saw the whole thing, and the ending, like all fun in the room stopped at the ending. And that to this day, you know, I've seen the movie in many different scenarios, including packed theaters and a kind of horror convention type of vibe. And even there, like when Ben gets shot, it's a fun killer for sure.
Yeah, and I was struck. I know this has been talked about so much, but I was not that young when I saw it the first time, but it's one the first three were my dad's favorite movies, and especially Dawn of the Dead was his favorite. But it was a presence long before I had full access to it, and it is weirdly the movie becomes so much more complex as you grow older and a deeper understanding of it. But watching it after not having seen it for a few years, I was reminded again, and I listened to the commentary. Romero talks about this, about how small and pulpy and modest it is, and how you're thrown in it's already happening, and it's, you know, it just sort of never stops. It never takes a breath, because it does ultimately the you know, what he launched with that has become this it practically rules the world right now. And I just wondered if you, I mean, I'm sure you've thought about this a lot, but your theories about its endurance, it's a big question. Maybe we can keep coming back around to it, but given its modest beginnings.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the interesting things about it. It's so modest, you know, like I can't really tell you offhand, like the initial reception of Dracula and Frankenstein, the novels. I mean, I think I can't tell you how quickly they were a splash. But certainly this had every odd stacked against it, you know, just made by a bunch of industrial gearheads in Pittsburgh. So the fact that it was so tiny and became this cultural changing thing. I mean, now you've got zombie cartoons and zombie candy, and it's not often that a new monster is created that joins the pantheon of like classic monsters. I think the obvious answer and probably correct answer is just that they're faceless, you know, and they're many. So most monsters, whether it's Dracula or Godzilla, they're just sort of these single entities that are out there. But zombie is everything and everyone, and it's like I guess it's like a virus, you know, because it passes and you become part of it. You know, it doesn't kill you; it absorbs you, and I think that that makes it just so malleable and so agile of a metaphor. It just like has endless uses.
Yes, and it implicates us. I was talking with someone, and you know, because zombies before this were always just sort of, you know, people who were buried accidentally, and or in movies, or the kind of hypnotized servants. Like everyone forgets that this is the movie that changed all that, and it's a movie that the first one doesn't even have the word zombie in it, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So, but how much it might have been spinning off 50s science fiction that's about the Cold War and like turning and changing, and then this sort of married it with the 60s sort of tumult and chaos and violence. It somehow pushed them together.
Yeah, I mean, he was doing what all smart independent filmmakers do, taking advantage of the low budget. So in his case, they had news cameras, you know, essentially to work with. And so they could replicate news footage, things that looked like 60s unrest or Vietnam footage or whatever, things that were handheld and shaky. And that's, you know, that they embraced that and wrote it for all it's worth, really.
Right, and I know Romero's talked about that there was no larger political intent to it, but what he also has talked about, and I think is aware, is like it comes like what's going on in the culture comes through anyway. Like,
oh yeah, and if you're not Romero, you're someone else directing that. You don't make the decisions he makes. You don't cast the people he casts. It's whether he may say there's no political message, but he was extremely political. And he continued to be throughout his life. So he can say that, but I'm not saying he's wrong, but he was he wasn't in a vacuum. He was operating in a continuum in which he was quite active and a liberal. He was a 60s radical, really.
Yes. And Dawn of the Dead, he did have an agenda of sorts. Agenda is maybe the wrong word because but he had, you know, it's a tale of consumerism, and right, it's about him watching that mall be built in Western Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think it changed with his, you know, as he changed and developed. But it made me think so much. I always loved Romero, even as a kid, in documentaries and about the genre, or really about movies in general, because he's such a buoyant, vital presence. And I just wondered if you could talk about your relationship to him before taking on this project? Both, I know you did get to meet him, but also just what he meant to you. Yeah.
As far as like physical interaction, it was very limited. I met him just once socially. I knew his agent, and he essentially just invited me to come have drinks with him and George. And that was it. We didn't talk. We certainly didn't talk about business. I don't think we talked about movies or books. We just kind of talked about, stories from growing up, just like, idle chit chat. That I'm not, for some reason, whatever that gene is where you get starstruck, I don't have any of that. I don't have like, it's that kind of fandom type gene. I don't really, I'm just lacking it. But still, he was my favorite artist of all time. So it was nice to sort of just in the cheesy way they say, put a name to a face. It was just kind of nice to see him. And I'm sure it did not stick in his head for 5 minutes, and he never thought about me again. My relationship to him outside of that is much more complicated, or at least much deeper. He was certainly a father figure type to me. He meant a lot to me growing up. He was, I think, the first kind of filmmaker that I was aware of as like a director. Like movies just came on, but this one is like, all right, there's a creator behind this. Because I saw that movie so many times, and there's this like little camera move across the cemetery, and his name comes on. There's a little American flag flying, which is just so perfect. And as I got older, I watched more of his movies, and they continued to really inspire me. And when you talk about, I saw Day before I saw Dawn, and that started making an impact on me. And I didn't even realize at the time that was a Romero film. There was no internet, there was no book about George Romero, so I was just kind of winging it as a kid, obviously. But even when I didn't know it was him, his work was affecting me. Tales from the Dark Side, that series affected me. He was the creator of that. I had no idea.
So there was something in his sensibility, in his storytelling, do you think? Or
Yeah. He and Rod Serling were kind of a pair, and I feel real lucky to have happened upon them, because they were so interested in things beyond simple entertainment, which would have been fine and plenty. But they were deeply invested in progressive ideas and social injustice, and they just that's why they did what they did, and they just hammered away at it both of their entire careers. So I think when you're so consumed with that as a kid, that becomes part of your makeup. And living in a small town in Iowa, I think it was hugely beneficial to me to have these kind of teachers that I was constantly looking up to and eventually trying to emulate.
Right. Yes, and just a more complex view of human nature, I suppose.
Yeah.
Getting a lot of entertainment. I often think of all the stuff I love, like especially was drawn to as a kid, and I think it like opens up this place for you as a creative person, that not everything is black and white, and there's all these ambiguities that are weird. We're all weird and deep down, and just
I mean, that's the great thing about Night, and you could say this for almost all of George's films, that it's just so unclear who's right. Like you love Ben, like he was my hero.
Yes.
But he's ultimately wrong. Harry in the basement is right about how to. But his tone is all wrong. Like he goes about he has the right idea. The basement's the safe place, but his approach to it, his people management skills are awful. But Ben's aren't that great either. He's like pushing people around, and
neither option is great.
they're not great. I'm not sure who you go with in that situation. Like if you had to pick a team, I guess Tom, the kid.
Yeah.
I mean, Barbara, she's out of it, so you can't choose her.
Oh my. Oh, but that's just the thing too. These are characters, we know nothing about them. We know
Right.
nothing about their history, but I mean, that's great storytelling. We feel 20 minutes into the movie, we've got like a beat on, it's really, people forget about that when they compare it to maybe other sort of pulp horror, or, there's a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you could take the zombies out of it completely and it's still a good movie.
Yes. And so just sort of quickly for everyone, how did they come to approach you about this product? I'm saying they, but
Yeah.
His wife
Yeah.
approached you?
So they technically is the Romero estate, but that sounds a lot grander than it is. It's basically his wife and his manager. So George died in 2017 after a rapid succumbing to cancer. About a month later, they called me, and this was truly something just out of the blue. It was not, in interviews over the preceding decade, every once in a while, George would mention a book, that he was working on a book, but it was always, it was never what anyone interviewing him was interested in, and he didn't talk about it much. So I did have a slight, bug in my brain that he was working on something. And so when after niceties, when they asked, so we were going through some of George's stuff, and one of the big things he was working on was this novel that he didn't get to finish. I immediately sort of remembered, yeah, I remember hearing about that. So why me? Well, obviously, who else are you going to go to? No, I mean, there's infinite choices. I think his manager was very.
I didn't ask why you. I make sense.
No, I'm assuming other people are wondering why me.
Yes.
It wasn't my savoir-faire. His manager was very aware that I was a real student of Romero, so I wasn't. Not to denigrate those who are great fans, but I was really deep into it, and it wasn't, and this ended up being important to them. From what I understand, I wasn't particularly obsessed with his zombies. I was obsessed with him as a filmmaker, regardless of whether he was making zombie films or not. And so I had a real deep, close to scholarly type of knowledge and interest in him. And I had just come off 2 collaborations that were successful. So I think that was sort of, that fulfilled the resume type part of it. And I don't know, they just asked me and I said yes.
Did you hesitate at all? I have to say, if someone said, okay, well, yeah, like Raymond Chandler.
Yeah.
Here's a manuscript. Nope, I'm not touching that.
Interesting. You would say no out of hand?
Yes, I would say no out of hand.
Interesting.
I would be too, well, there's a number of reasons, but I want to know why you did.
Okay. Well, all right. We'll talk about that later. I said yes immediately. The idea of something that affected me so early, like almost primordially early, the idea of closing that circle and being able to contribute to the story that kind of ends the zombie saga that he was writing for 50 years. It felt too magical. Like and just the fact that they were asking, like they wanted to know if I would take a whack at it. And I felt like, this was his wife and this was a book that was really important to him. I just felt like I couldn't possibly entertain saying no. I could try and fail. And there was a step where I wrote them. I read the manuscript that he had left, and I wrote up kind of my take on where I would go with it. So they still could have backed out and said, no, that's terrible. But yeah, I was, and of course there were fears and doubts, but mostly I'm pretty good at shoving those away during the day anyway. Mm-hmm. And there were times, of course, and I'm still suffering it. where they all come back. But for the most part, during the couple years of writing, I was able to stomp them down pretty well and just kind of
Well, I would
push
imagine
ahead.
that would be the hard part, is when you do have to you write a little bit about, like, once you were very deep in, they found a letter, a 9-page letter, right, of additional plans he had, and you had already gotten rid of some of the characters.
Yeah.
That he,
Right.
and like at a moment like that, it's not just that you put the time in, but you have to weigh it. You have to step out of that, out of your feelings for him and his, what could have been. I mean, if anyone looked at any writer's notes one day, I have put down all kinds of terrible ideas that I never touched again. But in that moment. Yeah,
there were definitely moments. I mean, any book's going to get edited at some point, and some things are going to fall away, and some of that editing is going to happen before the editor steps in and all that stuff. But that said, I did, and maybe it was just part of me enjoying the puzzle aspect of it, but I did try to use everything that we found. And that included a short story that had been published to his long lost website, 100 pages extra that we found after I was already far into the book. And then finally those notes. And every one of those discoveries necessitated going back and reconfiguring and redoing. But I think I just dug into that challenge, and it was kind of fun thinking, all right, now I have this new material. How am I going to make this work? It seems so impossible and now I have these 100 new pages. Can this character meet that character? Can these two characters be the same character? And it just became a way of trying to keep as much George in there as possible. And the challenge was then making it all feel fluid.
Yeah, it's so primal, though. It's like he's the father and you're reanimating him. I mean, wouldn't that be weird? Did you ever? I've had dreams about great writer I admire if I'm reading a lot of this stuff. But if I were doing this, I think I would have all kinds of dreams about, or maybe, even maybe just more, a little less creepily, like hearing their voice over my shoulder a little bit.
I hadn't ever thought about it as in the sense of like the son digging up the father, but I love that. It's probably good that I didn't think about that at the time. But yeah, that's great. I mean, and that just makes it all the more interesting to me, because ultimately this is art we're dealing with, and I'm not digging up dead bodies. So there's a playfulness to it as well. There's a for me, for everyone involved, it obviously meant the most to me. The estate, they didn't really know me. George is dead. I'm the one who's, if anyone's having to deal with sort of emotional issues around it, it was definitely me. And yeah, I mean, I think there is, that's why I took his prose and treated it so tenderly. I think like these were almost like his last belongings in a way. And I wanted to sort of wrap them up gently and find a place to snuggle them into the book.
Nice. I mean, yeah, he's very lucky to have had. I mean, that's sort of, I'm sure that's why they picked you too, because there's something you value it all. You're not treating it as a project, but
right.
It's in some ways, it's both, I suppose, an homage to him, but you're also like, he didn't finish it. And someone is asking, I realized I should have asked you to clarify, how far along was the book when you took it on? Like, how much was there?
Well, once we had all the materials, it was, I always say it like this, because it's complicated, that he probably wrote 1/3 of the book, but that wasn't the first third necessarily. He wrote pieces throughout. He wrote a chunk at the beginning. He's present at the very end of the book, and he wrote little bits that are now sort of strung throughout. So part of the challenge was, I mean, if he had just written half of it and stopped, that would have been a lot easier. Because then at least you understand how this works. You're just passing a baton, and I come up with the rest. But this was, I had to hit points along the trail. And that way it was kind of cool, because it did feel a little bit more like a standard collaboration in the sense that I couldn't go far off on my own. I could go kind of off the trail a little bit, but then I had to get back to the signposts he had put up. And then, so once you add his notes in about where he was going with the stuff, I would say that his contribution was about half.
And he was writing it off and on for,
Yeah.
so that's the other thing you're dealing with. I mean, most people don't, like, most novelists, well, so, I don't know, about half and half maybe, like write imperfectly sequentially anyway. So when you're taking on someone's unfinished manuscript, it can mean so many different things about what you're looking at. And if he's picking it up, then doing a movie or doing something else and coming back a year later, there must have been, there is a lot of stitching you have to do, understanding the essence of it so deeply that you can,
Yeah. I mean, as you know, even when you're just writing a book by yourself, if you take a time off and come back, it's a different person who's coming back to the book, and you don't recognize this thing that you've written.
Yes.
So there was definitely, he worked on and off on it for maybe 10 years. And I don't know how that spread out, if it's like, a little bit every year or took a 5-year break. I don't have any idea. But it was a place that he seemed to go to repair a bit, because he had nothing but disappointments, especially in the latter half of his career, of projects falling apart and all that. So here was like an empty canvas where there were no producers finally, and he could do whatever he wanted.
It's a dream.
Yeah, right?
Oh, we have a good question. Romero infused social commentary into his movies so well. Did you struggle with whether or how best to do that in our era?
No, not really. A lot of that stuff was baked into the manuscript. That was his primary concern. He wasn't overly interested in horror, really, George, particularly. I mean, as a kid, I think as a young man, he was, but he certainly never, in his maturity, didn't watch horror movies, didn't read horror novels. He was interested in telling other kinds of stories and consuming other kinds of stories. But zombies were what he had backed into, and those were the tools that he had. So this book was no different. Clearly, looking at his manuscript, he had his interests were these other things, these the social commentary, essentially, that you're asking about. That's what he was writing about, and that's when he came alive. He was writing decent zombie action, don't get me wrong, but when he was talking about characters and exactly the kind of muddy characters that we were talking about in Night of the Living Dead, that's when you could just tell he got excited. Like the prose just came alive during those parts.
Yeah, it's making me think. I think you write about this too, that he regretted the implication. I guess it's in Night that there's a it's a radiation charged probe that produced.
Yeah.
There's like an origin story.
The Venus probe.
Yes, that's right, and this is another reason why picking you. You knew how much he regretted that and wanted to keep. I mean, ever since then, right? He tried to, erase any notion that was the cause. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about why that was important to him.
Well, I think it deflates the metaphorical capacity of the zombie. According to him, originally Night of the Living Dead, there were going to be several theories that scientists and people came up with, and they kind of just didn't make the final cut. And so what we were left was just this Venus probe idea, which makes it seem like they're being affected by space rays of some sort. And he hated that. And so, he made 5 other zombie movies and just was careful to never get anywhere close to an explanation again. Because again, that ruins all of it. And I think that's one of the many reasons he didn't like, well, most horror movies, but other zombie movies, is that he just wasn't interested in that. This zombie movie says, oh, it's a kind of virus, and this says something else, but it's just like, he just doesn't care. Like, he's interested in how the characters react to X, and X happens to be zombies.
Yes, it struck me watching them again recently that the no explanation makes them eternal in
Yeah.
this wonderful way. And watching, especially Dawn now, it felt like it could have been made last week because
Yeah.
it felt so much like it was about grief, grief for the loss of the world we knew, that it was gone like that. And it reminded me of that. That was my dad's favorite exchange in that movie, was when why did they come here, and it's some kind of instinct memory of what they used to do. This is the mall, that
Yeah.
grief for the that it was an important place in their lives, so that
Yeah.
that just felt like so resonant. And I think, yeah, that works because they aren't grounded in a moment with an explanation tied to with too heavily to, even a mall, is has the vague feeling of the eternal now, because
Isn't it funny how sad Don is in parts? Like, I think when people think about it, it's the most candy colored of all of his movies, and it's got this occasionally silly soundtrack. And now I'm not trying to offend the diehard Goblin fans. That stuff kicks ass. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But it's sad. It's sad in a lot of ways. The zombies are sad. The whole idea of them coming back to the mall is sad. Obviously, once the zombies are out of the picture and it's the people living alone upstairs, that's tremendously sad. And that's, I mean, God, if anything speaks to material being classic, it's like what you said with Night of the Living Dead. If the movie or the book seems to change as you grow, and it grows up with you, that's high art.
Yes, no, I so agree that you feel sorry for the zombies in Dawn, and like that's also something about our feelings about this changing and our connecting to, again, you point out too, and I looked at his sort of Sight and Sound top 10 movies, and they're often adventure tales. Which are also, but ones that are very character driven and about people sort of pushed into a pressure point, and how, because one of the few horror movies that he liked, other than Repulsion, which I love too, is The Thing, which also is sort of very, very similar, and just shows the character matters most to him.
Yeah, I think his biggest influences back in the day were probably The Thing, Panic in Year Zero, which, if you haven't seen that, it's uncanny. Like he was borrowing some things from that film for sure. And then I Am Legend, of course.
That makes sense. We have a question. Beyond George's writing and notes, did you collaborate or work with anyone to bring his book to completion?
Well, mostly his wife. I really wanted to get, although I had a deep kind of academic idea of George, I didn't know him very well. I didn't know him at all, really. So I spoke to various people, but mostly his wife, to get a real sense of him as a person. And I spent a long kind of day with her in Toronto, and then could call her at any point and say, what did he think about this? What were his views on that? I wanted to be able to know when I came to a T in the road, which way he would go. That doesn't mean I would necessarily go his way, but I usually would try to.
Right.
And she offered up stuff like what you're talking about. She gave me his list of favorite films and stuff, and then I could watch those and study those, and be inspired and try to be inspired by those in the same way that he was,
Right.
so that I could start to become even more George, as if he had bit me.
Yeah.
And I was slowly transforming into George.
Yes, I love it. One of the things I love in your intro is you cite a line from the children's book that I didn't even know about, that Romero wrote, The Little World of Humongo Bongo.
Yep.
It was terrible to have your heart hardened, and that line really stuck with you and connected to you. And I wondered if you could talk about that. That feels like such a intimacy that he shares in that, and in the way maybe one only can when writing children's books, where there's a kind of purity to
Right. I think that's why I responded to it. So he wrote this wrote and illustrated this strange little kids book that was published in, I think, Belgium. And then only a few years ago, I think maybe the year of his death, a Canadian publisher put it out. So it was pretty obscure for a while there. And yeah, he talks about very Romerian things, but has to distill it down to sentences that you can really kind of understand and wrap your brain around. And yeah, so he wrote, "It was terrible to have your heart hardened." And that was one of the guiding phrases that I thought about a lot when planning this book. And this book had a lot of planning. This was not a sit down and write book. There was a lot of outlining by necessity because of the complexity. Yeah, and I think if we were just talking about Dawn of the Dead or something, and just seeing those people once they've got it all supposedly, and they're just dead, and the idea that especially in America, and he was a very America-centric filmmaker, I think. Just the idea of what are we fighting for? What's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow? We're just we're killing each other. He would have looked at the current situation that we're in right now with the pandemic and just, we've been sadly unsurprised at all of it. His theory was, according to me, studying his work, that the zombie epidemic, if you want to call it that, I prefer calling it an uprising, should have been handled immediately. We should have had our arms around that in a couple of weeks, but we couldn't because we were fighting for we all had our own goals that we wanted to preserve, and that's when you do that and you can't think about anyone else's happiness, you're dead. I mean, we're dead. The world is dead. We become the zombies. When your heart is hardened, you are, you're the walking dead.
Yeah, it's sort of, each time I think about it, becomes more malleable, but I would think now he would talk about that in terms of naked capitalism and self-interest sort of getting in the way of, because his movies, there's often so much about if there's collaborative energy that you can at least make it a little longer, and that's the only way. And that it was very collective spirit of the 60s that we're seeing again now, not from leadership, of course, but from the people, which is kind of, I would love to hear him talk about what's happening now, I guess.
He would have loved people in the streets. I mean, he would have loved that. Like that was where he came from.
We have a question. I was surprised pleasantly at the length of the book. My bias was that the Living Dead world is such excellent novella material. How did you go about deciding an appropriate length? That's a good question.
The book is quite long, but part of that was George and part of that was me. He clearly was setting into motion an epic story, and part of that makes a lot of sense because he had tried to work on a big cinematic canvas a couple times in his career, only to have budgets slashed at the last moment and having to rewrite entire scripts around that. So he did have a yearning to do something with, spectacular grandeur. So that's part of it. He just wanted to do something big. And the manuscript that he left kind of, it kind of went like this, like it got bigger and bigger. And although there were bits he wrote later, a lot of my job was like, all right, now I've got this outward widening funnel. How do I push this all back together near the end? So he intended it to be an epic. That was clear. And I didn't want to send him off with anything less, if anything, did I make it longer? Yeah, probably. But I just had this sense where it's like, this is his last words. I want it to be everything he had to say, as well as everything I had to say, and everything that I thought he might have to say. So there's a lot to get in there.
Well, don't leave anything on the table, right? This is
Yeah.
it, you know?
Yeah.
I think that's so grand. I mean, also, most of his career was operating in the world where feature films were the place that could happen, but now actually you could, I assume there's already Hollywood interest in this, that in TV you would be able to have the room and space to
Right.
tell these longer stories now.
Yeah. He wouldn't have, though. I mean, no one gave him money, you know.
No, I mean, it's so heartbreaking always to me what the indignities that, I mean, this is the story as old as Hollywood, but
Yeah, right.
he never got any credit for anything. And yeah, it felt like always I think he was self-confessed, not the politicker that, you know, he might have been. And you talk about that, not wanting to have your heart hardened in context of his experience.
Yes.
There too.
Yeah, like he was an idealistic guy. I mean, he was a cynic, true, but he came from a place in the 60s of believing anything was possible. And I think he had his heart, geez, it's hard to say, his heart hardened and his heart broken a lot out in Hollywood. He had a terrible period of time, if you look at his filmography, where he just didn't make anything. And that's the period where he wrote 100, I have no idea how many scripts, and everything fell apart. And, there are stories of him just walking out of rooms, on movies that were a done deal just because he couldn't believe what they were asking him to do. So yeah, I think it broke his heart. I think he had his heart broken many, many times. And it's easy for me to say and for his fans to say, but I wish he would have given up on Hollywood earlier. He was at his best when working independently on smaller stuff, I think. And I feel bad that those years were so painful, that when he had so many ideas. I've seen his archives, which will be public soonish.
Oh,
And
really? Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And they're just filled with hundreds maybe of scripts and treatments. And one thing I can say for certain is that they're not horror. I mean, some of them are, but it's every genre you can imagine. Like he wanted to spread his wings so badly.
You list some of the projects he was attached to at different stages. There were so many gems in there that I wish had been made, but one of them was a TV anthology based on Shirley Jackson's stories, which seemed perfect because she's also someone that doesn't reside comfortably in any category. And what it would have been to see what he had done with her. If
I remember correctly, because I paged through most of these things quickly. I think that was mostly a treatment, but there might have been part or maybe an entire pilot. But yeah, that's one that would have been great. He was always trying to Tales from the Dark Side was a success, and he tried many times to sort of get another series going, but did not.
So this is one question I do have to ask, and if anybody else has any questions before we wrap up here, I want to know, like you said you're not like fanatical fan person. It's not your nature as but fan culture has changed a lot. And it's become very intense in recent years. And I wonder if you had any trepidation about, people get very attached to their notions of how it should be, and was that any concern, or has that been a little bit of a challenge? Or?
No, that's a great question. I knew going into it that if the book was good, all praise Romero. If the book is bad, damn you, Kraus. So there in a way, there's no real winning for me, but that's okay. This wasn't about me at the end. I'm really just trying to. I know it sounds unbelievably benevolent of me, but I really was just trying to shepherd this work to the finish line. I have no doubt that people that some Romero zombie fans out there are sharpening their sticks. There's no question about it. But What am I? What
You
can
do
you do?
wrong if you did. I mean, you have to do.
Yeah.
We all have our Romero, but you had the actual stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to tell them, really.
Yeah, no, and it just speaks again to the eternality of his works and their long life and this essentially empire he created, though got no credit or money for.
Yeah, right.
It's really an American tragedy. But you move on. Can you talk to us about what you're doing next?
Yeah. So next month, I have two things coming out next month. I have a kid's book called They Threw Us Away, which is about teddy bears, which seems odd for me, but is more on topic, on theme for me than you might think.
Were you inspired by George Romero's children's book?
No, this predates that. It is definitely a Daniel Kraus teddy bear book. And then at the end of September, I've got my first comic book coming out called The Autumnal. So the first issue of that will be out in September.
My gosh, that's a lot. And when did you actually finish this book? Because this is such a long project, and I just wondered if it took you a while to shake off the.
No, I mean, I don't know how you work it, but I usually have numerous things going on at once and use them, and they effectively act as palate cleansers to each other. Yeah. So I can finish a draft of Living Dead, send it to the editor, work on something else, or one or two other things. Living Dead comes back, even though it hasn't been that long, my mind's completely wiped of it because I've been working on these other things. Yeah. So no, I didn't take a lot of time to shake it off. Plus, it's been pretty, talking about it has been pretty constant since I finished it. So, and that's okay. I mean, generally, I don't get out a lot, and my favorite topic is George Romero. So it's been a pleasure, really. Well, never more so than right now.
This is so great. I wish we were gonna have a beer now.
I could splash one on the screen for you.
It was so good to see you this way, and everybody buy the book from the bookstore. Don't go on Amazon, please. You buy it right now. It's perfect. You have time, and it's everyone needs it. So I would encourage everyone to do so immediately. And rewatch all the movies. Night of the Living Dead is streaming now on Criterion. So go George.
Go George.
Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I'm going to see if we have any other questions. Did we answer the one about if Hollywood was interested in turning into a movie?
Would there be challenges turning into a movie? I would think so, yes. I would think there would be challenges.
Yeah.
I would think there'd be many, many challenges. Especially if it was a movie, it would be difficult. You'd have to cut out. You'd have to really streamline this sucker, which is always possible, but that would be the primary challenge, I would think.
For me, that was the joy of the book, is that it wasn't streamlined into a screenplay, and you could really get in deep. And I think I could perform my own autopsies now. Actually, I like notes. Great.
My work is done.
Okay, and then let's see. D. Gonzalez asked if you could give him a pitch to read Rotters. He's kind of scared to pick it up.
Oh, don't be scared. Well, I don't know. Maybe you should be scared. I don't know you. Maybe it's too scary. You'll be okay. You'll be okay. It's a lovely family story where everything works out for the best.
It's no scarier than what's happening in the real world right now.
That's right. That's what I was gonna say. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much again for everyone who joined us. I did want to just point out that is my email address right there above my head. And we are building our virtual events program from the ground up. It's here to stay for a while. So if you guys wouldn't mind giving me some feedback, if you don't mind, just about how this process was for you, suggestions, tips, what worked, especially what didn't work, because we really want to make this work, because we are going to be doing these for a while. So thank you so much. And as Megan so wonderfully said, please purchase your book through Anderson's. Where you purchase your book really does make a big difference, especially right now. We really need those purchases. So thank you so much for being here, everybody. Thank you to Daniel. Thank you to Megan. And everybody just have a really great night.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Good luck to everyone. All right.